So to start our journey at addressing the trends, the first session today will be about digital transformation and the road to operational efficiency. And I want to invite Eddie Hartman from Simon Kucher and Partners and Bob Irvine from Viavi to the stage.
How long did it take to fly in from Tel Aviv? 20 hours. So my commute today was 20 minutes. It was 1/60th of Ariella's. And I know that a lot of people came from the UK, as Bob did, Asia. I really want to respect the fact that you've taken time to come to the conference. And I want you to leave with something more than just listening to me talk. I'm incredibly boring. If you ask my children, they'll affirm that this is true. I'm one of the more boring people that you'll ever meet. But I do have something to give you, 3 gifts, actually. The first gift is data. We've conducted a massive study, and I have the data, and I'll give you a summary, but really I want to let you know it's yours. Just email me or reach me through the app, and I'm going to give you a copy of this. The second is a framework, so a data-informed framework that you can take back home. So when you're talking to people and they say, well, you went to the Gemalto Licensing Live, what did you get? Hopefully you'll get a ton, and part of it will be, well, I got a ton of data, and I got a framework. And you're also going to get to hear from Bob Irvine, who's amazing. So real-life lessons of how important operations and operationalization is to successfully monetizing. But a little bit about me and my boring self. I'm Eddie Hartman. I can relate to a lot of what you are going through. I'm the co-founder of a company called LegalZoom on the sort of B2B, B2C side. If you don't know LegalZoom, it's a legal services company that does everything from wills to incorporation to intellectual property. I like to joke we turned divorce into a subscription product, and we did. So everything became a subscription product under me when I ran technology first and then product at LegalZoom as the co-founder. And then helped get a company called Ironclad off the ground. This, you probably know it, but it tracks, systematizes, and secures your corporate obligations. That's more on the SaaS side. So what I'm trying to say is no matter what walk of life you're in, I probably know something about where you're coming from. Now I'm incredibly pleased to be at Simon Kucher. I'm a senior director in the San Francisco office. Let's actually, if you don't know Simon Kucher, we're global. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary in business. I know that many people have not heard of Simon Kucher. We do a lot of our work going into companies through private equity and venture capital. But people in the press tend to say very good things about us. The Economist says that we do 50% of all pricing. So if you've engaged in a transaction, according to The Economist, 50% likely to have gone through our pricing. And the joke around the office is, we've been reading Rise of the Robots and all the automation that's going to happen. We don't know when Terminator will be released, but we will do the go-to-market pricing. Thanks. So we do concentrate on other things as well. In terms of revenue growth, we focus on discounting, for instance, discount controls. We take I think we pioneered a micro-segmentation approach to retention, which is one of our specialties. But really, it revolves around pricing. And pricing, as we see it, we're not price point consultants. We're pricing consultants. The way that we see price is a measure of value. Right? Economists have utils to measure value. We live in the real world. We have dollars. We have euros. A Swiss franc at rest is a Swiss franc, but a Swiss franc being transacted for a good or service is a measure of how valuable that was. We use gallons and liters to measure fluid. We think at Simon Kucher that price is a measure of values. That's sort of the holistic view. This slide is a slide that no one in this room needs to see. And I'm almost a little ashamed to show it to you because the mere fact that you're here means that you already understand that the world is shifting toward digital. You already understand that adaptation is absolutely essential. I'm lucky enough, again, to be at Simon Kucher. And one of the things that we do is a study every 2 years, our global pricing and sales survey, where we look at thousands and thousands of respondents. In fact, this year, we had over 3,000 respondents. And then when the data was all cleaned, there were about 2,000 that we thought were answers with true integrity end-to-end on this relatively long survey. Note all around the globe, note every major industry, A lot of the people, about 45% of the respondents were VP and above. So a really good mix, a really great data sample in terms of integrity here. The thing that we found, first of all, in terms of price compression, was that about half of the people say that they're currently involved in a price war. So about half, that's an increase. They said an additional about 20% said, there's a price war going on in my sector. I'm not in it, but there's definitely one. And about half of people, 47%, said, I am currently engaged in a price war. Then when we asked them who started it, and I love this, nearly 80% said, it was the other guy. It definitely wasn't me. By the way, if you look closely at the graph, you'll notice that an additional about 10% said that I did it accidentally. I really want to know who those people were. Right? Like, whoops, we're in a price war. But so where does this come from? Well, it turns out that even if you're not actively in a price war, 75% of people said that the pressure is building. It's built in the last 2 years. And this also was a little surprising. It does seem like price pressure is mounting year on year. And when we look at the causes, at the drivers, every single one of them goes back to digitalization. And what this means is that if you're not on the boat, you are at risk, bluntly. Price pressure will increase, and the drivers here, whether we're looking at low price competition or increased transparency, these are things that are being driven by increased digitalization. And by the way, when we say low priced, that doesn't just mean the price point. It might mean that the model has transformed thanks to digital. I think we're hearing a lot about, yesterday we heard about IoT, great presentation. I want to let you know we helped work with a major wind turbine manufacturer that, thanks to digital, no longer sells wind turbines, but leases them and charges by the kilowatt hour. Right? Boeing no longer selling jet engines, but leasing them by the mile flown or kilometer flown. So digital is allowing low-priced options and low-priced competition. It doesn't necessarily mean that overall prices are dropping, although of course they are, but it's coming at you from multiple directions because of what digitalization is enabling. So this slide also I found surprising. 81% of companies said that they're investing in digitalization. I kind of want to go to each of the companies in the remaining 19% and sort of shake them and say, what are you doing? Like, really, you're not investing in digitalization, but surely 81% are. And here comes my first question for you. So we all have the app, right? And we have the ability to answer a survey. I'd like to know if you have invested in digitalization, and I assume the fact that you're here means you probably have, over the last year, 2 years. Was the goal to increase top line? Was the goal to reduce costs? Was it all the above? Or was it neither, something else, like customer satisfaction? Okay? This is great, by the way. I love this. Because running that study with Wharton took me the better part of a year, and now I get my results, boom, like this. Should have done it this way. Great. So overall, we're seeing that those three categories are capturing nearly everything. Actually, this is very close to what I'm about to show you in the next slide. Interesting. So 27%, 2 to 1, increasing top line to reduce cost, 51% saying both. Clearly a focus on increasing revenues, which is great, because here's the data from our study. Not entirely different. So we're seeing that here, 2/3 of people taken together are very interested in either increasing top line or increasing top line with some other goal. But the surprising thing about this slide is how few people are actually making it happen. 75% said it didn't work, 77%. So when we looked at this, we asked, well, why didn't it work? What was holding people back? And I think a lot of it is potentially this single-minded focus on things, metrics, KPIs that come from a prior era. So when we ask people, unit cost reduction, is it possible in the next few years? Only half of people said that it was. They said that the biggest driver of the future growth is going to be revenues. However, when we looked at all the data taken together, what we saw was just a shift in mindset, which is required. Once upon a time, you made a product, you found a buyer. These days, you find an audience, and if you're lucky enough to retain them, It's because you're creating the products and services that they need. That is the conclusion that we drew. That is the fundamental shift being driven by digitalization. And if you want to grow top-line revenues, that's the kind of effort that's required. It's a holistic effort, in other words. So our data-driven approach to a framework begins from the bottom and extends upward. We need to really consider all parts of the organization when we think of digital transformation. It can't simply be a change in revenue. I see a lot of people nodding. Thank you. Yes, it really is. It's all parts of the organization coming together. And really, it begins with operations. Right? It begins by, whether you think about sales or revenue or product, it all begins with the enablement component. So Bob Irvine is going to talk to you a little bit about what his journey has been. And again, I want to encourage you to reach out to me directly if you want a copy of the full global pricing survey. And if you want, we actually have a much deeper data analysis of this particular framework and why it makes sense and what it can, how to actually implement this at your company.
Thank you, Eddie. Good morning. My name is Bob Irvine. Oh, sorry, got it right. And I work for Viavi Solutions, and I'm part of the operations department. Historically, for me, I spent 20 years in product management before moving into operations on a software product. But to give you a little bit of background on Viavi Solutions, we have two main business segments. The first on the left here is our network and service enablement group. That's the group that I'm part of. And we make products that help providers and organizations optimize many of the most complicated networks in the world. This is cellular networks, backhaul associated with it, the base stations, the fiber that's connecting them together, and everything in between. We offer test and measurement products, service activation and assurance products, and overall performance management. We also have an optical solutions segment, which makes pigments and things used in security and thin film coatings and things that are used, for example, in production of currency and things like that. But today I'm going to be talking about basically the network and service enablement side of the business. We have 45 offices globally. You may recognize by my accent, I'm not from these parts. I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland. We're an $800 million company with 3,000 employees worldwide. So what problems and challenges are the operations department trying to solve? Well, one of them, the top one, is support and scalability for licensing. And licensing's changed over the years, and there's multiple systems, and Viavi has grown many times through acquisition. And as you acquire new companies, obviously, different systems have been in place in those companies. We take the best practices from the companies that we acquire and move forward on that. But with so many different systems, process knowledge can be lost through attrition, through reorganization, and there's also a growing diversity in the types of licensing to meet the market needs. Now, before I came out here to this conference, I thought, I've been working as a product manager in software licensing for about 20 years, and I don't know, does anybody recognize one of these things? This was a state-of-the-art, 20 years ago, software licensing dongle, and it fits onto a Centronics port, or the parallel port from your computer. Now, while the licenses on this are still good today, I challenge you to find a computer that actually would have one of those connectors on it. But don't worry, because there was an upgrade, because that was rather large. We went to the smaller parallel port dongle. And of course, USB came along. And today, though, we're in a much more complicated place. In the old days in operations, you basically put your license onto that, stick it in a box, ship it, and you're done. If I want to lend it to Eddie, I give it to Eddie, and he's got it. And now I don't have it. But we're still secure. We're all licensed. But today, there's a need much more to have many more different licensing types and much greater flexibility. We don't just live in a world where you buy the software one time and it's yours and you're done. Today, and I think this was mentioned by Shlomi earlier, we're in much more of a model where you rent the software or you use it, you fit it to that project, and when it's done, you then buy it again the next year. Basically, customers want to be able to put their budgets for specific software items in specific packages. And all the software, I mean, how many people are using Microsoft Office 365 or the sorry, mine's going blank there. The audio thing, no. Spotify, that's the one. So we're all very used to, yeah, we're all very used to the state where we're paying for things, we're licensing them on a periodical basis and renewing them. And so the operations department needs a way of servicing our internal customers, who are the research and development groups and the product management groups, who want to offer licensing in those different ways. With a system where you have many, many different solutions in place, we have disparate license tool ownership and expertise. Now, where we have a system like we have from Gemalto with it's basically an enterprise software license system, that's owned and managed from the IT group within Viavi. So that's a central group managing and making sure that system is secure, it's backed up, it's maintained. But we also have 40+ homegrown tools that have developed through R&D groups over the years to meet specific product needs. They're not always got the best documentation, and there's inconsistent maintenance of those items. When things are centralized, it's a lot easier to keep a tight control over them, and that reduces your overall fire drills and other things you'd rather not be doing when things go wrong. Then there's the operational costs. When you can standardize in a single system, you have one outlay, and you can budget much more accurately for what your licensing costs are going to be within the company. So in the operations group, we're trying to address all these different things within the scope of operations. But it obviously touches groups outside of operations. It touches your research and development group. It touches your product management group, who want to have access to and be able to utilize those different licensing solutions. What this slide looks at is a typical flow of what happens when you're bringing a product to market. Now, the names in the boxes here will change depending on which company is doing it, but the overall process, I imagine, is very much the same for all companies. You start with the top left there, the product concept, and you decide what features or what product we're actually going to sell, and what items we're going to license within that. In other words, what am I going to be able to make money on for this product? And once that's decided, and by the color code here is if it's in yellow, that's the product management team basically deciding that. If it's in the kind of reddy pink, that's the research and development. Operations are in the kind of orange, and the blue are the sales group, and the green is the customer. So that's what the color coding there is, just who's principally involved in making those decisions. So as we flow through to the new product introduction, we start to come up with a license matrix. In other words, a set of, here's a list of product items, and here's what is going to be licensed. And then you have your development group go off and develop both the product, and in theory, they'll also have to develop the licensing. Now, if you have 10 or 20 different development groups or more, depending on the size of your company, what you don't want is as different groups reinventing the wheel, having to do that same licensing work again and again. And I see people nodding. I guess this is and the thing that I've found when I was a product manager and also still in operations is development groups will always have the idea that they can do it faster, right? Rather than using this standardized solution we've got, we can do it faster. And while they might do it faster for the one time, the roadblock you've got to make sure you don't get yourself into is product management say, okay, we need permanent licenses, we'll stick them on dongles, customers will buy it, and we're good. What do you do then 9 months down the line when we say, actually, we need time-based licenses as well, because we've got a great new segment in the market where we can sell the product for rentals? What do you do then? If you've standardized on an enterprise-grade licensing scheme, that is not a problem for development anymore. That's something that operation can solve by simply changing the licensing model in your entitlement management system and issuing a time-based license. You do the R&D work once, but you can then reissue different license types as opposed to have that R&D group go off and redevelop that licensing scheme. And not just do it once, but every R&D group doing it and trying to maintain it. So I say in the 20 years that I was product managing that product, we initially sold it on dongles, but we ended up with people wanting to buy it with rentals, people wanting to buy it for a fixed year, different time bases. And because we had a licensing system that, by chance then we had chosen, it was the Rainbow Sentinel, we were able to coexist the new license types with the old ones. But then moving forwards past the development part of the cycle, when you get onto your product release, you then, operations is getting ready to be able to issue all these licenses. And on the right-hand side there, you'll see in the parallel with all this, we've got the sales team out selling the product, ready for the customer to hopefully buy it and get that license fulfilled. And so when an order comes through from the sales system, operations again, okay, so it's an order for these 3 parts. We have to say now which licensing system is using that. Okay, it's that licensing system, so we use that part, and we provide that all and send that entitlement out to the customer, and they can download it. And this works well, but obviously there's a lot of touch points there in operations, and also for customers who are buying products. If you have multiple different licensing systems in your company, that customer may have to interact with you in multiple different ways to get the licenses they've purchased. They buy product X, it uses the Gemalto system, so we use that. We buy product Y, it uses a different licensing system, so we have to have a slightly different interaction with the company. And one thing that certainly our customers are always telling us is we want to make it easier to do business with you. And one of the ways we can make it easier is to have consistency in the way we supply products and the way we supply licenses. I think we're going on to another poll question here. And this time we're going to ask you, what challenges are you experiencing? Presumably, since we're all here talking about licensing, most of the people in the room here are involved with that. What challenges are you experiencing with your licensing operations? Is it the ability to scale? Is it to provide a positive customer experience? Or the ability to deliver various different monetization models? Okay, here we go. So it's the large segment here is the ability to deliver. Oh, no, we're still got more people coming in. It's the ability to deliver various monetization models is the winner here with the positive customer experience. And interesting here, which goes with yours, people are less focused on the operations, which according to Eddie's data, is not necessarily the right area to be focusing on for the largest money.
So Bob and I actually talked about this quite a bit yesterday. I do think operations comes through in the critical role of enablement. How are you ever going to achieve various monetization models if operations and the subsets of operations that fall into operationalization have not done that incredibly important enablement function?
Yeah.
So even if we don't see it as operations qua operations, it's sort of inherent in the idea that we have to release different monetization models.
Exactly. So I jumped 2 slides there. Looking forwards to the vision that Viavi has for our future, and we're very much at the start of this journey. We have decided to standardize on a single licensing structure and model, is Gemalto. The area in this slide, which you'll see, it looks very similar to the last one, but there's a couple of areas which are different, which I'd like to highlight. The first one is in the bottom left in the development. Because we're going to standardize, we will not need to be spending development time reinventing the license models each time. If you want to start a new product development with licensing, the plan that we have that we're enforcing is that we're going to have that based on Gemalto, so we have that common license model reuse. The other area that's changed is in the operations side. You can see in the automated fulfillment. If we can reduce the touch points with people having to read things off one screen and enter it into another one, then we can increase efficiency and reduce any errors also. So there's 2 benefits. There's increased efficiency and reduced errors. And the last part of the benefit that we have from this automated fulfillment component is allowing customers to be able to experience e-commerce, where instead of having to go to the salesman, have a discussion with him, place an order, the customer can go to a web portal and place an order directly, and the fulfillment process from that is therefore automated all the way through a common licensing mechanism and common delivery portal through the enhanced customer portal. So it basically brings all these elements together. So there's a lot of reasons why there's a lot of benefit in standardizing, because in order to achieve that automation, you obviously have to integrate your licensing components with your order management systems and with your customer relationship management systems. That obviously involves connectors, so you have to have your licensing system able to be open to being interfaced with. But the other thing is, you're not going to go through that. That's a fairly major exercise to do that. And you're not going to do that with 5 or 6 different licensing systems. You have to have a single licensing system so you can connect it effectively and efficiently. So looking forward to the future and the benefits that we see that we will get from embarking and continuing on this program is standardization for license development allows us to reuse licenses across products and across business units. It enhances the flexibility in software monetization. In other words, people who previously perhaps hadn't been able to offer time-based licenses now can. It reduces the operations, R&D, and PLM effort during the NPI processes, because anything, once it becomes standardized, once people know it, they get used to it, it takes less time to implement them. By linking the license delivery to the order management systems, that allows us to automate those processes. And that reduces the touch points, reduces the points for error, increases the efficiency. It also reduces revenue leakage, because if you are able to offer different licensing types, you don't get into the situation where perhaps someone's got, they want to buy your product, they've got money for a project, but you're only offering permanent licenses. So you end up discounting that product because you want to take the business. Now that works on a one-off basis, but you've no control once you've sold that product to that customer whether they're going to use it for lots of other things. So if you're able to offer time-based, you can offer and fit your product to what the customer wants to buy, and there's no revenue leakage in that model. Overall, it gives us improvement to our business processes. It allows us to automate the control of royalty-based items. One of the reasons that we do licensing is to make sure that we are true to the suppliers that we have. If we have something that has a royalty, we want to pay for that royalty, and we want to make sure that whoever we're passing that on to is only using that product within their license terms. So having the automation of that gives extra confidence to the people that we buy from, that we're controlling the product we're buying and selling on through that. It also allows us to automate the validation for service support. One of the things that I think we're very used to now is software. When you buy it, you don't just buy it one time, you buy it and you buy a service contract with that for ongoing maintenance. Once we've got the licensing system automated, it makes it easier for our support teams to access who is still in support because they have a valid license and who doesn't. Again, meaning that the customers who are paying for support get that support they're entitled to, and those that are not paying for it don't. It also helps us to enhance our revenue recognition capability. Anyone who's selling software will know that if you're selling software with an associated service, you only get to recognize the revenue for that when the customer's got that piece of software or got that service. Again, if you're managing your licensing through a centralized system, you have another validation the customer has got that piece of software they bought for it and they've redeemed the license. And the other nice thing about the way that the Gemalto system is working is it's the self-service part of it once you've issued the entitlement. Once you have issued that customer with the entitlement, they can then log in and redeem that license themselves without any further interaction from Viavi. Because when a customer buys a product from you, they may want to buy a product that may be locked to, for example, the MAC address of the product. They may not know at purchase time what the MAC address of the PC they're going to deploy it on is. What you don't want to get into is a situation where they're delaying their purchase because they're waiting to supply you with that piece of information, or you need a double interaction when you say, okay, well, I'll sell you it, then when you send me the MAC address, I'll send the thing back. Sell them the entitlement, give them a piece of software which will take that fingerprint, and then allow them to release the license themselves as soon as they're ready to take it. But effectively, they're entitled today, but they can take that entitlement, activate it as soon as they're ready to. So fundamentally, within operations, the standardization of licenses is going to allow us to scale because when we have common processes and increased automation, that allows us to license more products more efficiently. It increases efficiency in product development because the research and development groups they don't have to figure out how they're going to do the licensing. They can take the licensing toolkits and build that into the products. And the product management team have got access to a broad range of different licensing options. They've got time-based, they've got pooled licenses, they've got licenses which are permanent. You can have any and all of the above, and you can mix them. A product that I worked on at one point, we had a challenge with that product because one of the items we were selling, we couldn't rent. It had to be a permanent sale. So we were able to license that one permanently, but have the rest of the options available on a time-based basis. So the ability to mix and match so that you can tweak your offering to your customer in the most effective way to allow you to reduce, as I say, that revenue leak, to avoid having to give away software because it was only able to be packaged in one way. Thank you.
You know, before we go to questions, Bob, as you were summarizing there, it struck me about how well what you just said fits into our study, and I'll explain. We saw that 81% of people are investing in digitalization, and we saw that overwhelmingly from everyone, right? If not the central goal, a significant goal is increasing top-line revenue. But you can't do that without the enablement from operations. You can't do that unless you can find the monetization model supported.
Exactly. I mean, product management want to have a wide variety of different ways of offering the product. Operations have to have a way of delivering those different models, and development have to have a way of creating them. And I say you don't want to have to recreate that same model. If you have 20 product lines, you don't want to have to recreate that model 20 times. And we are in a different world today from where we were like 5 or 10 years ago when the model was buy once and you're done. Today, our customers will find many, many different ways of asking you to deliver that product or that service. And the onus is on us to find ways of fitting into the way the customers want to buy the products, because they're going to buy the products from the companies that can supply them in the way that they want to buy them.
Yeah, loyalty is dead, but retention is not.
It's not.
And you have to find the model that works for your customer once you found them. And that all starts with operational enablement.
Yep.
Well, I came away increasingly convinced that that is really potentially at the heart of that 75% failure, which we've seen, by the way, reproduced again and again. I just actually was at Google. They said the same thing. About 75% of companies that try to make digitalization work to increase their top line fail. And I think that we're hearing something incredibly critical in terms of diagnosing that failure. But we should open it for questions, right? Yeah. I assume someone's going around with a mic.
No, mic, but no, maybe everything's. Oh, Vince?
He's got a mic.
You've got a mic.
Turn him on.
Thank you.
Vince is already mic'd.
So, Bob, I think we belong to the same support group that meets Tuesday night somewhere.
Yeah.
So my question is, in your organization, who owned this process of change? Was it ops, or did it come from the product group? Like, who was the champion? Ops
are driving it.
Yeah.
Because ops have to deal with the fallout of not having this process. I mean, as I say, today we're not at the golden place yet. We're dealing with multiple different licensing systems, which really complicates the operations process, because you typically may have 1 or 2 people in operations having to deal with this product comes through, okay, it's licensed that way, which means we have to do this. This other product comes through, it's licensed that way, so we have to do that. That takes up a lot of time. And it also opens up the possibility for errors, and you want to eliminate that. So operations are driving it. When we, as I say, as I'm going back to the product management, I'm selling the licensing system to them, and provided it meets the flexibility they need, they're good with that. But it does require, and I think we talked to this in a session later about thought leadership and how do you drive this. Licensing is not something which only affects operations. Operations are involved in the delivery part of that, but you'll have inputs across the whole organization. Your research and development teams, they're under pressure to develop things faster and deliver them. Your product management teams who've got an input because they need to deliver stuff to the customer in this way or they won't buy it. You have the sales team who need a way of selling the thing, and if you can't deliver the license till after the customer's given you something before, it complicates the whole process. So licensing is something that touches lots of parts of the entire organization, but operations within Viavi are the group that are driving this standardization.
Okay, thank you.
What part of the organization does
Licensing, well, the part is it's the operations group, which is, I guess it's operations. That's the part of the company. That's the company function, operations.
Okay, so what's C-level?
Well, that's a good question.
I can tell you in my experience, it's often been matrixed into a CFO function, but your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I don't know, Jim, you can maybe answer that.
I'm boss manager.
Yeah.
So our organization, I run an operations engineering team. Most of what we do is test development. A lot of our products are hardware-based. My team develops the test gear necessary, the test software. We develop the test process for the hardware that we build. We took on the ownership of licensing many, many years ago before I was involved in the organization because nobody else was willing to pay for it. So as the company grew, various different licensing types, Bob's been very polite in not mentioning the other company that we pay several $100,000 a year to that we're walking away from so that we're standardizing on Gemalto. In addition to those two third parties, we had, as Bob mentioned, over 40 different homegrown solutions. And all of that was sitting within operations engineering. And in the course of the last year, I've got IT to agree to take ownership of the application. So they're now paying for Gemalto. It's now part of our office, our back office structure. So we've got IT very directly engaged now. We've got the drive coming from operations because, as Bob said, we had a lot of bodies doing a lot of very manual tasks to deliver various licensing types, and we need to cut that down. We need to reduce the number of hands that are touching it, and by standardizing on one tool, we'll be able to get there. Where we report up to, we report to the Senior Vice President of Operations, who reports directly to the CEO.
Yeah, sure.
Just a high-level question. Interested to see you had a number of products, legacy products, using other licensing systems that migrated over. What kind of strategies did you take to encourage product managers and customers to migrate from the old to the new?
Well, that's a good question, and we're still very much in that migration path just now. Effectively, from a customer point of view, the benefits that we're able to offer is a single portal where you can get all your licenses from. And from a product management point of view, really it's about convincing them, and it's not, I'm not saying it's easy, it's not, because nobody wants to change because it's easier just to stay where you are, right, than make a change. But some of the product management, for example, the benefits they've been able to see is the fact that we're able to offer more different flexible types of licenses that they couldn't have before. Like we've got customers, sorry, I'm not going to say customers, my customers are the product managers. They have situations where they're only able to offer permanent licenses. So by migrating to Gemalto, without doing much more R&D, we're able to now offer you time-based licenses as well, which they would like to be able to sell time-based licenses. They don't have a vehicle to do that. So it is a sales job as well. As in with any change in organizations, organizational change is never easy, but it starts with the guys at the top, and I think we'll be talking about this in a session later. You need to have empowerment from the top level management down to say, we're going to do this. If your head of R&D is not going to impress on his teams that we want to move towards a single licensing system, you're going to fail because his management team, the guys below him, are not going to play ball. So it really involves the whole organization coming to an agreement that we're going to move forward in this way. And I think Shlomo put one of the slides up the back. Doing nothing is definitely the wrong thing to do. You have to make a start, and even when it's tough, you have to make a start. And that's where we are at the moment. We've made a start. I don't want to pretend we're at the end. We're not. But we've made a start.
Yeah, I wanted to just also put in, that's exactly why we produced that data-driven digitalization framework, showing how important it was to really think through, including regulatory as part of your licensing structure, revenue recognition, FASB compliance is part of your licensing structure, and of course the operations and technology at the bottom. By the way, if you're having trouble doing your internal sales and convincing upward, you don't, but some people do, I would consider taking some of the numbers out of that global pricing survey and saying, look, our competitors are definitely doing this. Look at the failure rate. Think about what it might mean to underinvest in the necessary underpinnings from operations and enablement.
So I'm happy to say that we've already doubled down on Gemalto as the solution moving forward, and the buy-in that we've had from the top is actually pretty good. So you'll be hearing a little more about our experiences later on today. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.
You mentioned having perpetual licensing in the past. How do you handle moving customers forward when you've already sold them something perpetually and move them onto a new SaaS model? I think that's where we will struggle, like convincing them to, hey, this new thing is better, go to it, when they're looking back at me going, hey, I bought this and I own it forever.
Yeah.
Is that a question for
either one?
Well, I guess
Why don't you start, Bob, and I'll chime in.
And again, that's not really what my focus is now. That's, I guess, if I was a product manager, that's what their challenge is. As an operations, our goal is to be able to deliver the two different models. But I think you're not the only way, you're not going to easily turn people off a permanent license. That's, you know, and in the products that we worked for, we didn't try and do that, but we offered extra features, not necessarily as perpetual features. So if you've got a base feature which is perpetual, that's fine. But then what you do is when the new great technology comes in, you introduce that as a time-based only. We've certainly used that strategy because it doesn't take away from anything that anyone has legitimately bought. They get to keep that, you absolutely, and they should. But then when the new technology X comes in, you say, okay, technology X is available as an upgrade, but this is only available on an annual license. So you can start to migrate by starting to, when you introduce new features, introduce them only available as time-based licenses.
I think part of the danger is companies, I think, sometimes try to rip the Band-Aid off too quickly, and they move, from on-prem to, from perpetual to another licensing structure too suddenly. We find that oftentimes a hybrid works, as I think Bob was, discussing. If you can find the right features and if you can sort of measure them in a value equation, like, well, what would the total cost of ownership be? Is that a good trade-off for these additional features? You can use that to migrate people into a different licensing structure. But I think underestimating the difficulty of moving people off a perpetual is where people get into trouble. You really need to think through the value equation that's going to move people into a different licensing structure that enables those features.
What was the timing? What was the timing of your transition? So there was some period of time where you were making your decision that you needed to go to this singular product, and then there was some period of time when you had to, decide which product out of the singular product offerings you would use, and then there was some time frame for the actual transition from your current into what you're moving into. So can you give us an idea of the breakdown?
Yeah, I mean, just to be totally transparent, I've come into the overall process when we're in the implementation phase. So we're at the start of the execution phase now. I believe it took about a year probably of analysis and things before that, and it's certainly going to be, we're not going to be out of this transition phase before the next year to 18 months. And then some products will never migrate. They will die on their old system. But the biggest part of the transition things where we see this has to move, that's going to take a year to 18 months. It's not something that's going to happen overnight because it simply can't. There's too many moving parts in the organization to do that. And before we get to the final vision, that could even be longer. But the main thing is you have to have a vision, you have to decide you're going to do it, and you have to start making moves. Until you start going down the road also, you'll find there's things you didn't realize you didn't know until you've actually got on the road. But the important thing is to say sitting there not doing anything is definitely not the right answer.
Okay, we have one last, or are we good? Okay, thank you both. Thank you very much.